Perfect. Here's Roy. Hi. Great. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Food Systems Pavilion. If this is your first time joining us today, for those of you who have been here previously, thank you for sticking with us till the end of the day. We have a very energizing session. As some of you will know, we have spent the day talking about food loss and waste, and particularly the opportunity to be addressing food loss and waste as part of the bigger food systems transformation agenda. And not only does this have benefits for climate through the reduced methane emissions and CO2 emissions, it also puts people at the center, because we are facing a humanitarian crisis where we have 2.3 billion people facing food insecurity, around 800 million people facing chronic hunger. So we've had various discussions, and we are going to have a bit of a change up in the session structure to close the day. We have a number of esteemed thought leaders, practitioners, and entrepreneurs with us, and we want to give them each 5 to 7 minutes to talk about a very exciting idea, solution, or an aspiration that they're really seeing to be addressing food loss and waste as part of the climate agenda in a way that also benefits people. And so, and then we'll have a bit of discussion at the end depending on the time. So we'll go ahead and get started. And I'm very, very happy to welcome to the stage first Ms. Ada Asakwe. And Ada is the founder of AgriLay Ventures, and you are also a Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa board member. I know you have just completed an all-day board meeting, so we will take that into account, but I'm sure you have many exciting ideas for us to consider. So please come and speak.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you, Lisa. I'm just going to put my water right here. That's fine. Roy, can you? Oh, okay, yeah, so it's great to be here. I'm just going to jump right in. You know, for 4 years, I was a senior advisor on investments to the Minister of Agriculture in Nigeria. And in those 4 years, pretty much my job was getting folks to invest in agriculture. I was like, you know, we're the largest producer in Nigeria of citrus fruits. We're the 8th largest producer of pineapples in the world, largest producer of tomatoes in the entire Central Africa. Just, you know, you could go on the largest, and you're like, okay, but then what, right? And the then what is that, you know, eventually it was all wasted, over 60% post-harvest losses, things that don't even get away from the farm, due to the fact that, you know, poor logistics or no storage capacity, or one of the things that was dear to my heart, no buyers from the market, so no demand from the typical folks who should be buying locally grown produce, industrialists, food processors. And we focused a lot of our efforts on that because these food processors would typically import their raw materials. So rather than buying from the farmers locally, they would import their French fries, or they would import maybe their cornstarch instead of maybe buying cassava locally. It's over $300 billion industry, so you can imagine that's why we were sort of focusing our efforts on talking to the Cargills of the world to come and invest and all of that. I did realize that in our conversations, we weren't really speaking about the restaurants, who were also demand drivers for this industry or for the farm. And, you know, I was like, okay, but a restaurant is also like a Nestle, right? They're also buying, potentially they can buy from the farmer. So why aren't we having these conversations? And it was a high growth space. You know, it's growing 25% annually, quick service restaurants. So when I decided to become an entrepreneur and roll up my sleeves and start building, I decided to pretty much enter this space. I started a company that was directly focusing on buying from farmers, specifically fresh produce, fruits and vegetables, adding value in the form of, first product was our fresh juices, all natural. And then we also started a restaurant brand. Today we have 8 cafes, only buying from local farmers across Nigeria. We also have the largest all-natural juice brand in Nigeria as well. We're pretty much sourcing, it's relatively small, about 500 tons every year of fresh produce. from these farmers, but I really wanted to just prove that it could work, that it was possible to not import what we should be growing from our farmers when our farmers remain poor, and the fact that they were having all this waste. So that's sort of how I got into this space. And eventually it was like, people were like, oh, we love your brand. You know, we want to start a franchise. Can you give us a franchise? And I was like, you know what? In the same way I was trying to tackle a big issue with food loss and really trying to get our farmers wealth, there's still another issue that was tugging at my mind. And that's the fact that, you know, we have such a high level of unemployment in Africa. Young people are unemployed. And, you know, you have over 20 million young people entering the workforce every single year, only 3.1 million jobs, meaning that we have to create about 1.7 million jobs every single month for young people to pretty much have a life. And that's why Africa remains the region that has the highest number of entrepreneurs. Because at the end of the day, they can't find a job in a bank or whatever, and they say, hey, okay, I'm just going to start a business, right? So 1 in every 5 folks in Africa right now is starting a business, according to the data. But then, no finance, all these issues, no skills, no training, no support. And we talk about these things, we hear it. So I was like, okay, if I'm to do something to scale my business, I want to do it by touching these lives. So we decided to start a program that I sort of see as a social franchise, not the typical spend a lot of money or need to source a lot of money to get a McDonald's franchise or whatever. It was like, how do I grow my business in a very intentional way to tackle these big issues? And, you know, our program was launched last year to pretty much give opportunities to unemployed youth to own stores, these newly restaurants, where we actually provide the business in the box. They don't even have to put out money or financing to pretty much start this out. We set it up for them. They get the training, they get the support, and they get the mentorship, all of it all together. And for me, you know, it's just like, this really is it. You know, at the end of the day, we want to hit about 50 next year as we scale. But, you know, it's what we can do for the broader food ecosystem. We are going to have more, you know, focused entrepreneurs who are pretty much transforming the food system because of what they're doing. And we're really creating these opportunities for young people who typically wouldn't have these opportunities. So that's my quick, you know, 5 minutes of some of the things we're doing in our little way. It may seem small, but hopefully, you know, as we replicate this, and my view is that if we can replicate this in our own way, we truly, truly are positioned to make a difference in our food systems. So thanks for this opportunity.
Terrific. Yes. Thank you so much just for sharing that. And, you know, one of, I would say, the most entrepreneurial and innovative food banks that we work with is the Lagos Food Bank Initiative. And they are just beginning to work with growers. And it's so inspirational just meeting some of the farmers that they're working with, the innovations, the ideas that are there. So just thank you so much for sharing that. We're also very pleased to have with us Roy Steiner. And Roy, I think everyone knows you, but you're a Senior Vice President for Food Initiative at the Rockefeller Foundation. And I know that you all, for many years, focused on food loss and waste, and now you have taken on a very broad climate agenda. So we would love to hear a little bit, as you're taking a look at this COP and its intersection with food systems, what are some of your ideas or the things that you're thinking about related to how we can be tackling food loss and waste as part of this bigger climate agenda? Thank you, Roy.
Thank you. It's nice to be here, and it's always inspirational to hear from Ada. You know, I had an amazing mother, and one of the things that she would always emphasize is to take care of food, because we live in such a wasteful society, and she grew up in a period of time where there was lack. And when I hear people like Ada who are creating systems that are not wasting food, I think that is a noble enterprise, and we need to all be thinking about that. At the Rockefeller Foundation, we really started investing in the area of food loss and food waste about 8 years ago in something called YieldWise. And it really came out of this analysis. You know, I've spent a lot of my time improving the productivity of agricultural systems. And if you take something like, I've invested in a lot of breeding programs, et cetera, to get a new seed out into the marketplace, a successful seed increases yields by 10 to 15%. It'll often take at least 10 years to get that out. And you think about the fact that we're just wasting 30 to 40%, it just, there's a real disconnect there. And there's so much that can be done quite quickly and effectively. And I think the Global Food Banking Network is a great example of an organization that does that. We've funded them to like look at kind of key pain points in the supply chain, especially around ports and places where massive amounts of food gets wasted. It's just because people aren't thinking about how do you and prioritizing and valuing. And I think it comes from, you know, ultimately a lack of mindfulness and a lack of care. Because if you really love something, if we love our world and our children, and we would be much more careful with this precious resource of food. I wanted to just maybe share a couple of things, and then I'll pass it on, which is we often think of food waste as these tons of stuff that just gets dumped. But actually, food waste occurs in many different ways, and one of the areas that I'm very proud of and excited by is how do we process food in really wasteful ways. And so the example I think many people don't understand is the consumption of refined flour. When we refine flour, you actually get rid of 20 to 30% of the volume and 90% of the nutrition. And you literally either throw it away or feed it to animals. And the question is, why would we do that? Well, 30 years ago, there was a really good reason for doing that, because refined flour had a shelf life of over 6 months, whole wheat a shelf life of about 4 weeks. Well, that's no longer the case. We now have milling technology. We can have shelf lives of 6 months plus with whole wheat. And it's really simple. You dry it a bit more and you pulverize it a bit more. But just by shifting from refined to whole wheat, and we're doing this in school meals all over the world, you suddenly get 20 to 30% more food and 5 times nutrition. Like you would go, like, we have the systems that are just, we made really bad. When people say there's not enough food in the world, that's just not true at any level. We are wasting food, we have inefficient systems, and human beings can do a lot better than we're doing now. There is no need for the kind of deprivation that we're seeing in the world. And I think, you know, just thinking at COP, we have to really elevate what it means to be a human being, a person who cares. And so I think food loss and food waste is one of those extraordinarily important areas that has been neglected. And I'm so grateful to the Global Food Banking Network for all the incredible work they're doing. So with that, let me pass it on to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Roy. Well, of course, we are having this momentous COP where food systems is such a focus here in the UAE. And we are so honored to have with us today Ms. Khulud Al-Nuis. And she is the Chief Sustainability Officer of the Emirates Foundation, Secretary General of the NEMA, National Food Loss and Waste Initiative. And I thought maybe we could just have a conversation given all of the work that your organization has been doing. So please have a seat. Am I in the way of the PowerPoint? Okay. So I wanted to make sure you had a chance to talk about some of the new ideas and innovations on food loss and waste that you're doing here in the UAE. So please.
Thank you. Delighted to be here today. You know, we are privileged to have you all here hosting COP28. I think this year COP has been exceptional when it comes to food. There is a lot of emphasis, and food has been on the priority of our agenda at COP this year. Na'ma, allow me just to give you a quick brief about what Na'ma is all about. Na'ma is the National Food Loss and Waste Initiative. It's a reflection of His Highness the President's vision to actually address overconsumption and food waste. We were established early 2022. So we're pretty new. It's almost 2 years now for the initiative. We have been working on a number of areas in collaboration with the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment and Presidential Court and the Emirates Foundation to drive this initiative to tackle food waste across the supply chain, so all the way from farm to fork. Our key enablers are really trying to increase the level of awareness in the UAE community. Our theory of change, as you can see behind us, has a top-down approach, but also a bottom-up approach, with the key enablers being around increasing the level of awareness, building data around food loss and waste. Data is not something that is easily available around food loss and waste, so we're doing a baseline study to try and understand where the hotspots are. Where do food loss and waste occur the most across the supply chain? We are also working on behavioral change. And as you know, we all have habits of wasting food. So really our focus is to change these behaviors, to change our habits, our practices, by introducing simple steps in our day-to-day life, simple nudges that can help change the way we look at food and the way we handle food. Our approach is really to pilot projects with key sectors across the supply chain, to build guidelines that others can follow that will help us scale up, to look at policy areas, and hopefully all of this will create a shift to new norms where food is not being wasted anymore. We want to become a nation where no food is wasted. In the last few months, we've been concentrating on a number of innovative pilots with the hospitality sector. I'm sure many of you have been around and have been enjoying the hospitable culture we live in, but unfortunately, a lot of food goes to waste. So we've been introducing simple nudges like messages at the buffet to highlight the importance of food waste, working on portion sizes so that no food goes to waste. I think when you have a buffet, automatically people start piling up their plates, and almost 30 to 40%, as you mentioned, tends to go to waste. So again, we want a shift in behavior. Something else we have introduced is getting a lot of the restaurants and the hotels to actually start measuring and reporting to us this primary data. And we believe that when people actually see how much they're wasting, it's a lot more impactful. So we introduced, other than the black garbage bags, we introduced transparent bins, so that when people are scraping off food in the bin, they're actually seeing how much food is going into the bin. And we believe this is really impactful. Our trials have achieved a very high reduction rate around food waste of 44%. Yesterday, we actually did an amazing trial with Hilton around all their operations, 13 of their hotels across the breakfast, whereby basically we've managed to reduce food waste by 62%. Of course, we cannot achieve all of this because what sits at the core of our business is also innovation and technology. And with the support of technology companies like Queno Solutions, who are with us today, we are able to measure We are able to analyze data, and this is really how we make a huge difference. So innovation and technology is really important for us. We work with a lot. We invest in food tech competition. It's a local and an international competition that gives us access to a lot of the new startups that add value to the food ecosystem. And we try to work with them across the board to reduce food loss and waste. We also have another model whereby we've been closing the loop and creating a circular model where we have been working with a lot of the food banks and the charities to make sure that perfectly edible food is repurposed and is sent through the charities to those who are in need. And then again, we're working with new startups and technologies like Reloop, who basically come and take the unedible food and turn it into fertilizer or other products. And this way, we are diverting as much food waste from landfill as we can. This model has been very helpful in diverting food waste from landfill, but also in helping us track how much meals we're saving, how much amount of food waste we're compositing, how much we're reducing carbon emissions. So monitoring all these different KPIs allows us to track our performance as we progress. This also was very helpful during Ramadan, because we had a number of social events. This is usually the gathering month in the UAE. We've run a number of pilots that allowed us to save almost 1 million kg of food that was destined to waste, just simply by bringing together the right partners and facilitating the right discussions, because we all have a role to play when it comes to either rescuing food or reducing food waste. This is not something that we can achieve in isolation. We work with everyone across the supply chain to make sure that we have collective effort and there is enough collaboration to achieve the UAE's target of reducing food waste by 50% by the year 2030, which is also very much in line with our food security strategy, but also with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 12.3.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing all that. It adds a lot of context to the
Thank you so much
conversation.
for giving me this opportunity.
Do you want to say anything more about some of the examples of emerging solutions happening in the UAE?
So the emerging solutions that are happening are really working with a lot of innovative companies and startups to try and integrate their technologies across the supply chain. So I'll give you a few examples. We worked also with an innovative company called Replate. And they tend to connect food donors with charities. And this is a great way for us because it creates efficiencies for us on how to tackle food loss and waste. Another example, and I just had a session somewhere else around basically integrating food waste in extracurricular activities in schools. So we collaborated with a Japanese organization called JICE. They have an interesting online platform or portal where they actually get kids at home to track their food waste. So every day, the kids would actually have to take a picture and upload it to the system to show how much is left, how much food is left on their plates. But they also have to go the extra mile of calculating how much is this in terms of carbon emissions. And this is a great way of educating young people about the importance of food waste, but how also it's linked to climate change. What so many people don't know is the fact that food waste contributes to 10% of the carbon emissions. And it's not just the carbon, but it's also the methane, which is very potent to our environment. And it was amazing. We called this program the 7-Day Ni'ma Diary. And over the course of 7 days, you see how much the students become much more conscious of the food that's on their plate. And it reduces the amount of food that they waste. But it's also a great way because they're not only educating their peers, but they're educating their parents at home about food waste. So these are just some of the examples of how we're tackling food loss and waste in the Emirates.
That's so helpful. So one of the initiatives that we have at the Global Food Banking Network is looking at policy frameworks that might encourage or discourage food loss and waste. And I know we didn't potentially plan to talk about this, but I would love to hear if you have any thoughts kind of on the policy, I guess,
Thank you very much for bringing
that you're
this up.
considering as part of this.
This is a very hot topic right now. Actually, one of the policy areas that's really causing a limitation to food being picked up is the food safety policy. Unfortunately, many times when we have a lot of nice events, we have a lot of food at these events. So when I talk to the hotels and I say, you know, I want this food to be repurposed, to be picked up, the first thing they tell me, oh, sorry, we can't. It's been there for 2 hours, although it's still perfectly edible. But because of these regulations, we're not able to pick up the food. And a lot of times I take that responsibility and I sign a liability waiver just to get the food picked up. So we will be looking at some of these policies to do changes so that we can create a more enabling environment in the UAE. Another policy that we will be looking at is around separating food waste from the general waste at the household level, because this is a very important initiative that will allow people to become a lot more conscious of how much food is going into the bin. So there will be policies as well in that area. And the third policy area will be about looking at how do we educate the local community about the difference between best before dates and expiry dates. Again, this is a big debate around the world, but also here. Unfortunately, a lot of food goes into the bin before it even expires. So it is really important that we educate people, we create policies in that space as well, because unfortunately there is 800 million people around the world that go to bed hungry every day. And here we are wasting a lot of food.
You know, so for the past 5 years, we've had a partnership with the Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic examining food loss and waste policy frameworks, and we're now up to 25 countries, and it has been so interesting. A lot of the things you're touching on are exactly what our findings have been, that many places they have food safety guidance, but it's only for food that's being sold. It's not for food that's being donated. So you need to have these specific things written into policy. Obviously, date labeling is a huge, huge issue and causes a significant amount of waste, and then liability protection being another big one as well.
I don't know if you have a similar one in the US, but here also we have a problem when it comes to odd veggies. So, for example, the guidelines of retailers and the guidelines of also a lot of the hotels is to go, because of they want to maintain high quality, they go for the grade A produce, the lovely looking potatoes and tomatoes, but nobody wants to buy the odd veggies. And again, we've been working with an amazing online platform, and it's one of the new startups that we're working with who are really trying to market odd veggies in the secondary market, but also trying to promote it to households. It has an odd shape, but it's perfectly edible. It tastes the same, and it's even cheaper. And we want to work with hospitality and retail to see if we can get them to change these guidelines, because again, this will have an impact on their cost even. So it can save, it can create a lot of saving. I mean, at the end of the day, when I go to a restaurant or a hotel, I don't know if the tomato in my soup is an odd veggie or not. I don't know if the apple in my juice is an odd veggie or not, because it tastes the same. So we really want to create that change in a lot of the practices across the supply chain that are leading to food loss and waste.
I think that's brilliant. So we are fortunate to support food banks in 50 countries, and 40% of everything distributed through our network is fruits and vegetables. And the single largest source of the fruits and vegetables are the imperfect or inglorious fruits and vegetables, and it's because they don't meet those cosmetic standards. So this is just amazing. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
just the
Thank you
details
for
of
having
this.
me.
It's been fantastic. So congratulations on all your success.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Privileged to be here.
Wonderful. So it was terrific to hear about, I think, what the UAE has been doing specifically on food loss and waste. But another, of course, amazing moment of this COP has been the formal declaration that talks about food systems, where food loss and waste reduction is called out. And then Andy and I were involved with the Non-State Actors Directive Committee, which was really putting together kind of the non-state actors' call to action, where food loss and waste and promoting circular economy approaches was indeed highlighted. So Andy, it was really amazing to meet you through that experience. And now I really want to introduce you and the incredible work that you're doing. So Andy Alexis Minguni is the founder of ROAR South Africa, and you have spent all day in the youth pavilion. You have been here since November 30th, and we want to hear all of your best ideas on food loss and waste reduction. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Are we on? Awesome. I was so happy when I walked in and I saw Food Forward SA because I'm from South Africa, and I was like, woohoo, go South Africa. We're on the map. Yeah, thank you so much for the interaction. I am Andy Lemguni. I go by Andy. Everyone calls me Andy. I was hosting Youth Day within the Green Zone today, the entire day. I'm so excited that it's Youth Day and I'm here because it's so important to have youth at the table and to have youth representation within conversations like these. So when Ada mentioned that 1 in 5 Africans are starting businesses because obviously unemployment, I was like, I'm the 1 in 5. Maybe 2, because I have 2 businesses that I work on. I am a social entrepreneur, and I would most recently being 3 years, got into the food space, but I've been a social entrepreneur for 7 years. I founded Raw South Africa, like you have heard. Raw South Africa is a communications hub that reinvest its profits into primary schools and townships and children's homes, and we provide the public speaking training. But because I work within vulnerable communities, I was someone that was like, public speaking is something I do. After I left school, I was so excited to, be involved within local communities. And then we quickly realized that public speaking is not a need. I mean, it is a need, but it's not a prevalent need within those communities. So I started supplementing my programs with food programs. And then after a while, I just needed to exist within the food system a little more meaningfully, because this was the biggest challenge that I was seeing and finding that people within the communities that I serve were facing. So I got into food systems as an impact storyteller, and I was highlighting that, South Africa is not necessarily high up in terms of statistics, in terms of countries that face lots of food challenges. And I was trying to highlight that people in urban settings also face challenges to access to food and hunger. And then after that, impact storytelling, you then realize, you need to do a little more than that. Because when you go and collect people's stories, they then ask, what more? What are you going to do for me? Why am I telling you my story? What is this going to do for me, right? Everyone is invested in their personal interest. So I started consulting and working with companies within the food systems, curating programs for youth in agriculture, and really supporting people and working very literally on the ground, visiting farms, trying to understand the youth landscape and the youth context to map out what youth food equity actually looks like. And then I came across food waste. Oh my goodness. So at the time, I lived with my adoptive older sister, and she she grew up in scarcity. They didn't have enough food, lots of children in the house. And as a result, when she got older and had a great career, whenever she made food in her house, she always made more than she needed. Because when she grew up, she didn't have enough, right? So this was if anyone comes to my house, there needs to be enough food. And then after that, you kind of start finding that a lot of food goes to waste as a result of that, and it wasn't sustainable. So I started home composting, right, in her place. And I would do that, and it was just like a practice that I had. And obviously, it's not pretty. Like who in an urban setting does that? And I would like whatever the compost that we'd have after like a 30-day cycle, we would give it to my mom to put in her home community garden, or community garden that has now grown. And then you realize that as one individual, you can do so much on your own, right? So I started like influencing this culture of doing it at home, and I've founded many, many startups. But we've created, I partnered with some climate tech innovators in Ghana, and we've created a product called EcoCycle so that people could actually home compost and recycle themselves, right? So it's so like you can realize that from your personal experience, you're then able to find the solutions and then influence people, and you kind of have to make it trendy. So we have a system where we'll provide you with the sand for the machine. We've made sure and tested that it doesn't smell, because that's also like, oh, I don't want it to smell if I'm like separating my food. And when you mentioned it, I was like, yep. When you were speaking, I was like, I do that and that and that. But it's been so interesting that just seeing how people are willing to take up the movement is just something that you have to create and try to make fashionable. So just addressing that at an individual level, being able to appeal to people because even within these spaces, I've been to many food system dinners. Like you heard, I've been here since the 30th. I've been to many food system dinners, and I can tell you so much food from just those dinners has gone to waste. Because half the time, most of the time, we're networking, we're speaking, you don't really have the time to eat. And we aren't cognizant, we're food system players. We aren't cognizant that we too are contributing to this, right? So being able to appeal to the person and say, listen, you too can you can do something about this and mitigate it from that front. But I work with amazing organizations, and I just wanted to highlight a lot of the solutions have been mentioned. I love that this is a solutions forum. I'm sorry if I'm taking too much time. But I work with many organizations, like you heard about the Odd Food. There's a company, we've got a program called Odd Plates. So we're able to make that food fashionable, create beautiful meals with an organization called Nosh Food Rescue in South Africa. We create fine dining meals from Odd Food, right? And you can shop after the dinner. You pay quite a bit to be there. You experience a fine dining experience from Odd Food, and then you get to shop for your own, because now you've seen that this isn't bad food, right? This is food you can use, and from that lens, we're tackling food waste, right? You need to appeal and teach people more than anything, because it's the lack of knowledge that is why consumerism is still something that is such a big deal and something that persists on. There's another organization that we work with, People's Pantry. They work with Food Forward SA and other food-based organizations in South Africa. And we've created it's called People's Pantry. So women in a local community collect recyclables, and they earn points for their efforts. So we're tackling not only social challenges, but environmental ones too. They collect their recyclables, and with the points, they're able to shop at a surplus food store, right? So this, every week, on a weekly basis, they have access to nutritious, real food that would otherwise go to waste. And we also have this element of restoring dignity, because you're able to choose. Oftentimes, food is given to you, and the regulations, I'm so glad that you brought that point up, the regulations around donating food are so stringent that that's why it ends up going to waste, right? But it's so beautiful where we've seen what the women are able to do in changing this narrative of what soup kitchens and food hubs look like in the local context. I just need to make sure I'm not... Oh, yes, and there's another organization, Sobe. They work with local street food vendors in South Africa. Whenever their food is not sold, people are not going to buy it, so it usually goes to waste. So they're like, you know what, we'll still buy it from you, and they turn it into sorbet. Some nutritious, they experiment with flavors. So you can find that there's solutions taking place on the ground, right? So it's going within local communities and making sure that you're able to meet people where they're at, finding out how they are doing it. And if we're able to do that at scale, I think would actually, have solutions to some. It's not a thing of we're still scrambling for solutions. The solutions are there. How are we meeting those solutions? Which is why it is so important as people that exist in this space, in this high level, we're having the discussions, we know the numbers, we know the stats, we've heard them all week. But what are we then doing about it? How do we emerge? It's been a big year, like we've heard. It's been a big year for food systems at COP28. How do we then ensure that those funds and all those pledges and everyone that's signing up actually acts on what they are saying? That is the most important thing. This is only the beginning. It starts with the conversation, and from there, you actually have to act, right? How do you ensure that those funds translate to those projects that are actively doing the work? Because if we continue to do that, then we'll get somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy, so much. Well, we're nearly to the end of the session, and I just want to thank everyone, all of the speakers, for the incredible insights that you've brought. We're very fortunate, though, to have us with us today to close Dr. Agnes Kalibata. Dr. Kalibata is the president of the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, but you have worn many, many hats for many years and are a true leader in the food system space. And I just want to thank you for being here and invite you to share some of your takeaways that you're thinking about related to this COP focus on food systems and how you might think this agenda is intersecting with the Food System Summit we had 2 years ago. So Dr. Kalibata, thank you so much.
Thank you. If I knew that my board members were going to be here, I would probably have said no. So I don't want to embarrass myself. I usually say these things when my board is not in the room, so I'm going to be a little bit moderated here. No, but thank you for putting this together. I think as the food community, this week, I was here at the beginning of the COP last week, so this week has been really huge in the sense that 2 years ago we were all asking ourselves, what is food systems? What is this? What are we talking about? And now, 2 years later, we actually have now over 140 countries that have endorsed the Food Systems Declaration. And the whole idea is that the Food System Declaration, once endorsed, really gets us to continue having engagements around food, both outside but now really inside the COP conversations. We are struggling to definitely get it on those conversations today. But even the Green Climate Fund stayed out of the mainstream COP conversations for a while. And today it's the thing. So food one day will be the thing. If we don't get it on the table today, it's not a loss because we have 140 countries that have endorsed the declaration. But definitely we want to do this faster because food is contributing a huge amount to climate change. And if you live in my part of the world, you know that we have no time to waste. And maybe that's why food loss and waste is becoming so important. We have 78 people right now in a room somewhere in Ethiopia working on finding solutions, food problems. It was amazing that these people, 50% of the projects they are looking at are on food loss and waste. And that's because really, they see the opportunity from what you said, Roy. We are gaining so much in terms of genetics, but we are losing double that in terms of food loss and waste. I mean, if you go to plant maize or grow maize, you're hoping for about 15% increase, 20% increase in your yields. If you get it, you're doing very well. 30% increase if you're doing very well. But we lose about 40% on the other side of things. So I really think that the opportunity of recovering what we are losing right now is huge. We lose also on the environment side. In Africa, every time we talk about we are increasing food production, believe you me, 70% is coming from more land and probably 30%, only 30% is coming from genetic gain. And yet the rest of the world is working on genetic gain. So that's the big thing. Now, to just conclude this whole thing, I wanted to make a link to health. In the work we did with YieldWise, the work you were talking about, Roy, in Tanzania, for me, what stood out and really made me know we must do food loss and waste in ways that is important to everybody is, met this farmer who had produced 5 metric tons. Now, for a farmer, 5 metric tons is incredible. In an African farmer, smallholder farmer, first of all, the question becomes, where do I put all this maize? Number one. Number two, this maize is going to spoil faster for me. To spoil so fast, I don't know what to do with. My mom, by the way, has refused to use hybrid maize because she says, I just don't know where to keep the stuff. Keep it away, I don't want to see it. So me, I am thinking I'm doing a great thing. She's like, just keep the stuff away. Where do I keep it? So anyway, this lady had so much maize. So I asked her, we had introduced PICS bags to help them conserve maize so that it doesn't spoil from insects while they are waiting to sell it, so that they could even hold it a little bit better so that prices can improve. And because they were using pesticides to conserve maize, and we were saying, no, you can't use pesticides. This is not good for people's health. So she said, okay. She understood the principle of not using pesticides. But she had 60 bags from her savings of her produce. And she decided that for 15 bags, which is what she would use between one season and another season, she would use PICS bags. For the 45 bags, she would use pesticides. So I said, and she innocently was like, I said, so what is going on here? She said, this is for my family, the 15 bags. This is for selling. And I was like, but you're selling it to people. You're selling it to people out there. She's like, but I can't afford it. So then immediately I went to start meeting the government to talk about tax on PICS bags. We need to remove this tax because this is really hurting people. If you look at it from a health perspective, think about how it is impacting people. But let me remove it from this farm and take it to my own household. My own mom, the only time she stopped using pesticides in beans is when I said I would not take beans at her house. So I said, when I come home, I will not eat beans. That's when she stopped using pesticides in beans. So this is the life these farmers live in. Remember, it's the tropics. They harvest this crop, it spoils faster than they harvest it. So what have they got to do? They are going to use pesticides. But what they don't understand, they don't have visibility of how pesticides are impacting them. That's not something they have visibility of. This is not something they know. So we got to do everything to deal with this problem. So this is the true cost of food that we talk about. When food, you show up later with all sorts of cancers, with all sorts of damage in the hospital, and nobody really can put a finger to what happened. And it was actually the pesticide you've been eating since childhood because your mom is trying to save the crop. So anyway, that's the story. And I'm really glad that, no, don't look sad. It's not sad. We've moved on. That's why we're having these conversations. We've moved on. And at least, for me, the good news is that farmer knew that it was so important for her family she was willing to invest, let me put it differently. She was willing to invest in PICS bags for the crop she was saving for her family. And now it's my job and the job of us, the rest of us policymakers, to make sure that PICS bags are available for all the households that need them. But it's not the only technology. The biggest missed opportunity is the type of technologies we could invest in post-harvest management that could create jobs on the African continent. And again, I keep talking about Africa. That could create jobs for young people in addition to saving lives, in addition to saving the environment. So thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much just for that. I just want to give a special thanks to all of the speakers that we had who so generously shared their ideas and solutions and thoughts around this important issue and the energy you brought to it. So please, let's give them a round of applause. And thanks to all of you who have been with us either for part or all of the day to talk really about the opportunity to address both planetary and people issues through food loss and waste reduction. As a reminder, I'm with the Global Food Banking Network, and we are very proud to represent community-based organizations that are every day saving food from going to waste and increasing food access for people that need it across 50 countries. And I just want to quote what Andy said. These are my personal heroes, and they are showing up every day in their solutions that work. And so we wish you a very good rest of your COP, and we have a lot of optimism about the future. So thank you to everyone. If you spoke on this panel, or I guess in this session, if you could just stay for 1 minute to have a photo, that would be great. Otherwise, please enjoy your evening. Thank you.